Well, Fred, this is our 45th episode. Can you believe it? 45 episodes, and we haven't had to, well, we don't do any editing, but we hadn't had to edit one thing in the show. We've done 45 episodes without saying, hold on, we got to do a retake. That's unbelievable. I'm actually proud of that, the fact that we can go do these, off the cuff and not have any issues.
Most of the time, not even have time to finish it.
Yeah, and we need more time on every episode, So, that's cool. When I did the Hangar One show, they would make you say everything over 3, 4, 5 times. I mean, it was grueling. The first day, I filmed 13 hours. I sat in that chair, 13 hours, and they filmed. And you had to say everything over and over. And not like I made a mistake, That's why I like doing this one.
Yeah.
So, hey, I got a couple of books to give you. This one, Jody Cook, The Beginner's Guide to Bigfoot Research. Give you that. Then I got this book on Tom Slick by Lauren Coleman. And I'm going to give you this one, too. You know what the cool thing is? I read this, and he's from Pennsylvania. He's from Clarion, PA, Tom Slick. We've had a lot of people that are actually from Pennsylvania. It's amazing how many in the field, they were born or raised in Pennsylvania. I don't know if you know this, though, but Slick's father was kidnapped by Machine Gun Kelly.
Really?
Yeah, and that's where the term G-men came up. When they finally caught the guy, Machine Gun Kelly, he referred to the feds as G-men. So how do you like that? That's where that term actually came from. And I was reading through this. So I'm going to give this to you. Maybe you want to, in one of the future episodes, talk about him. Because he was the guy who did the Yeti expedition in the Himalayas. And then he talks about the British guy. I can't remember his name, that Lord somebody in England who really screwed up the whole thing for Bigfoot when he said it was all faked. The evidence and everything was faked. But I get to this chapter here on cryptozoological info, and Coleman is talking about giant salamanders, and I couldn't help but think of Stan Gordon.
I'll let it go.
There you go. You can have those, and we'll do that in a.
Tom Slick did a lot of investigations in the United States too.
Yeah, definitely. But that was, a lot of the original information on Bigfoot was from him.
They'll be called about salamanders now.
Giant salamanders. But hey, let's talk about, I read a lot of books in order to do my research. I got a couple I want to go over with you. But let's talk about the Mothman Prophecies, John Keel, okay? I was actually surprised when I read this book of how little of it, there's 226 pages, right? And I thought, like watching the movie, the Mothman Prophecies would follow that. I would say less than half the book is about Mothman. The other half, it's a lot about UFO sightings in Ohio, West Virginia. I personally never considered this a UFO case.
Oh, it is.
It is. I never thought that it was a UFO case until I read the book.
UFOs, Men in Black.
Yeah.
The whole spectrum there. They get into the Ingrid Cold. Denenberger.
The phone calls. But the Men in Black too. The Men in Black too show up in this. But I would have never said. I mean, you're looking at a creature, a 6-foot-tall man bat with red eyes. That's a UFO case? I mean, I'm kind of surprised.
Well, the thing is, I think when it started, they started getting all the rash UFOs. I mean, UFO reports from all over the place and down in that area. Yeah, it was going on before and after. But let me tell you a couple of things in the book. We'll talk about it a little bit. One thing about West Virginia that'll interest you is that West Virginia is the only spot on the map that the Indians never occupied. Right, I know that.
Yeah, you knew that?
Yeah.
It was, West Virginia was considered, it was uninhabited. No Indian tribe had moved to West Virginia. So why did the Indians avoid West Virginia?
Demons.
Well, so yeah. Well, I'm telling you, the spirits and stuff that they look at, the Cherokees who were in Tennessee, they said that there were people in West Virginia, there were white people, no, in Tennessee, inhabiting Tennessee, that white people in Tennessee, right, who were very sensitive to the light and can only see at night.
Right. Well, they also, if you look at it, they used to come from Ohio into West Virginia, hunt, and then they'd go back. They'd never stay overnight or anything.
Yeah.
Because of the demons.
But it's interesting that the Indians were afraid of West Virginia, the Hollas and all of that. That they didn't ever settle into West Virginia. So the name of Mothman came from the sheriff, George Johnson, at a press conference. That's what he called him, because it looked like a moth, I guess.
Well, it actually came from a TV show. I think it was Batman or something.
You think? Well, I was going to say they could have called it Batman just as much as
they was doing something with the Mothman at the time.
Oh, okay.
And that's how it came about. They called it the Mothman.
Okay, but as a sheriff, maybe he saw it on Batman and called it Mothman. One of the things about the Mothman, this is weird though. When you think about the Mothman, he was said to have, it could fly up to 100 miles an hour. Right. Like the person saw it in the car, they're driving, it's flying alongside them, alongside the car. He's going 100 miles an hour in the car and it's flying alongside the car. I mean, that's incredible, There were things about this case that I wasn't really aware of, because I watched the movie, but I never really looked.
The movie had nothing to do with the book.
Yeah, it was different. The movie was a lot different than the book was. And then, so they said that more than 100 adults had seen Mothman from 1966 to 67. It was described as a gray, featherless, large man with leathery wingspan that would be like 10-foot wingspan. But he would go straight up like a helicopter, like Superman, straight up in the air without flapping the wings.
Right,
so the wings obviously weren't how he was flying.
Well, I think the wings were used for him when he was flying.
To glide?
To glide in there,
yeah. Yeah, he was described as, he didn't flap his wings, though, to fly. His face was a puzzle. No one could really describe it other than seeing two red eyes.
Well, when you get into that now, you had two different dogmen. Mothman.
Yeah.
Okay, they say there's one Mothman. Mothman, I think, is like Bigfoot. There's a bunch of them.
Okay.
Because in Charleston, right before that, they had the Mothman, they said looked like a dog man.
Okay, and the dog man is what, like a wolf person?
Like a wolf, yeah, that's what they're saying now about Bigfoot. There's dog men out there. And then there was dog man sightings and Mothman sightings way before this even happened. I mean, there was even sightings up there where I'm from in West Virginia.
Yeah.
Around Weirton.
So then you mentioned they were getting strange phone calls, high-pitched like beeping sounds, phones being hung up. The men in black, but these were tall, tanned guys with a good tan, and I think a lot of times they refer to them as Cuban-looking, because they were tanned. Orientals, yeah. This one guy, Peter Stevens, had made some sketches, and they were stolen from his business. So.
What else is nice in there about the one guy, one of the men in black that was in there, and they gave him a pen. Remember reading that?
A pen?
A pen to write.
Oh, yeah.
And he started pressing it, and he went nuts with it, like he couldn't understand what it was.
He couldn't understand how it worked.
And then another time with the Jell-O, he tried to drink it. One of them tried to drink the Jell-O. They couldn't understand what, and that's very interesting.
That tells you that they're not locals. They're not government officials or anything like that. They talk about metallic sounds, a baby crying, noises like dropping a pan on the floor. I mean, stuff that comes up in ghost cases also. The smell of hydrogen sulfide and suddenly feeling chills. I mean, those are ghostly things. Those aren't E.T. Alien type things. And it makes me wonder, was Mothman really a UFO case? I don't see it as a UFO case.
I don't either. I think it's from another dimension.
Yeah.
I mean, it came in and it stayed there for what it had to stay there for. Now, but they say now that a lot of the places that they have a catastrophe, they see Mothman prior to it.
Yeah.
Like the one nuclear reactor plant, they seen Mothman. And they actually said they seen Mothman in 9/11, before 9/11 happened in New York.
So this one woman is saying that for some reason here her home burnt down during when this was going on. She was having encounters with the Mothman. She heard the kitchen door open. It was double locked. Some sort of tall figure walked into the kitchen with heavy footsteps. She saw a large glowing object over the trees, and her telephone went dead. And eventually her house burnt down when she was having these encounters. Then it mentions the Walmsleys, which I didn't really know that they had a family history.
That's why he's so involved in it.
Yeah, well, I guess I should have figured that. I've never been down there. You have, and you've met him. But it says here, when the bridge collapsed, it was a black day for the Walmsley family.
I think it was his aunt or somebody. There were two of them that got killed.
Yeah, it was an aunt, because it said Frank Walmsley, the father, spotted his cousin Barbara and her husband on the bridge, along with a couple of friends, and then the bridge was like convulsing, and it fell at 5:04 p.m. There was a 700-foot suspension bridge, twisted and split at the moorings. They let the cable snap, and 50 vehicles crashed into the Ohio River.
You know, there's something interesting about that too now, because allegedly they inspected that bridge a few days before that happened.
And there was no problem.
There was no problem. And a lot of things are coming out now. They think that may have actually been done on purpose because of the union battle they were having down there.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, 38 people passed away when the bridge collapsed.
Right.
And this one woman here who's a witness says that after the bridge collapsed, they were at their house, they heard about it, phone calls, and they looked and they saw the eyes like in the woods, a couple of different sets. She said there was as many as 12 of the Mothman, 12 of them, up in the tops of the trees looking down at her house. So very different than the TV movie with Richard Gere, you know, very different. But to me, this thing, how is this a UFO case? I mean, to me, that would be like saying vampires or UFO or ETs. I never saw it that way.
I think they're saying UFO because at the time they was having all kind of UFO activity.
Yeah.
And they place it with that. You have another incident now where the government is actually saying that was paratroopers back then that they was testing.
Well, how does a paratrooper take off?
I read the article and I have no idea.
The things the government says is just so ridiculous. I mean, he was able to fly horizontally at 100 miles an hour, and then he was able to stand there, kind of like Superman, you know, put his arm up and go straight up into the sky without flapping his wings.
Well, but the government says that never happened.
That's some sort of creature that has anti-gravity, you know?
Well, but the government says that never happened. That's all.
There's a lot of things they say never happened. There's probably a lot of things we wish never happened. So then I got this article of Fate. I get the Fate magazine. Well, it's supposed to come monthly, then bi-monthly, and I think we're lucky if we get 3 or 4 a year, because they're really behind in keeping up with it. But one of the things they talked about in here was the Skoll experiment back in England. 1993 to 98, the Skoll, they were trying, Skoll, England is the location. They were trying to locate, make contact with the afterlife, with the dead, spirits. Right. And it was a 5-year study that went on with 4 people, psychologists, mediums. They did seances. It was 1993 to 98. And, you know, I'm reading through it. And they were told that they could do seances, but it had to be in the dark. No light can be on, is what the communication was. They wouldn't appear in the light. They said that they would get points of light would appear darting around the room, like an orb would bounce around the room. It would respond to commands. It would hit, like strike, rap the table, bang. It would pass through solid objects in the wall and come back in. They saw a three-dimensional crystal appear with some sort of spirit light that would material and dematerialize on the table. It would shake the table and make the table vibrate. They would actually see spirit hands, they would see just the hands would appear when this was going on. They put film in the camera but never used the camera, but then on the film there were images of some sort of writing in a language they thought might have been Greek or German. There were quotations from poems that was written in an antique German method of writing, and medieval drawings and symbols. But they never used the film. The film was in the camera, but they never filmed. Right. But then on the film, all of this stuff, strange hieroglyphics showed up, and they said it was typical poltergeist activity. But now here's the thing, that this is what the medical profession says, that poltergeist activity is actually caused unconsciously by psychic forces from the people, meaning that you have telekinetic ability to create all of these things.
Recurring spontaneous psychokinesis.
Yeah.
RSPK.
You see, because they can't explain this, they have to say your mind is more powerful and creates it. You know, they will never acknowledge there's an invisible entity, a spirit that's out there that's causing this. But the one thing the reason I really mentioned this, I was familiar with the case, but the reason I mentioned it, it was the article was written by Robert Schlock. You've probably seen him on Ancient Aliens. He's a tall guy, like 6'8". He has a beard. He's a PhD professor. The one thing he never mentioned in the article was that when it appeared and showed itself, it was a gray.
Well,
yeah. So now you're clearly dealing with the afterlife and ghosts. That's what they thought they were dealing with. So when it shows itself, and they filmed, they got a picture of it, it's him.
Yeah.
Why does he show up in a paranormal haunted case?
Well,
what is he doing there?
I think that ghost, aliens, and cryptids are all from the same tree but a different branch.
I agree.
I mean, I think they're all one and the same. I mean, they come in different forms. I mean, when you're abducted, a lot of people say their grandmother's up there, their grandfather's there, they're talking to them. Is it really them? Take a Bigfoot. Is it really a gray with a uniform on or some kind of suit? Or
they either make you see something telepathically, or they can take energy and materialize and change. They're shapeshifters. They're able to change their appearance.
But the thing is, where are they really from?
Yeah.
I mean, what are they?
Well, I tell you, Fred, more and more as I read these cases, and now that I'm in tune to the dark side and the paranormal and the demonology because of what happened with me, I see these markers that I say, no, that is not a scientist from space. When you tell me these different things happen, those markers belong into the paranormal and demonology, So, it was interesting, and it got my attention because he never mentioned the gray, and that was a big part of the case. And they want to all keep the demonology out of it. This is a ghost. This is an ET. This is an alien. They won't mention, and we'll talk about some other books I've read too, Carla Turner and some of these others. They never ever see that this thing at 3 in the morning that shakes your bed. Does an alien really do that? Show up at 3 in the morning in the corner of your room, freeze you, and make your bed vibrate?
Well, it's supposed to. That's when they're supposed to come and take you.
Yeah, but is that an alien? Because that's when the demonic stuff happens too, at 3 in the morning.
What they see. So again,
that's
what they're looking at. I mean, it's. I think the whole thing is, again, I think it's a game of good and bad, or good and evil.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't look at it that way, but I mean, you're talking about Mothman Prophecies with Kill. He got a book, one of his books. He does a whole chapter on evil spirits and that.
Oh, does he? Okay. I want to read that one then. Yeah. Bring it in. Yeah. I want to read that. Now, here's another article. I would have never thought of this. Rip Van Winkle. Rip Van Winkle, this article by Cheryl Costa, who's speaking in Erie in April at our conference, Rip Van Winkle is an alien abduction case. I never thought about that. I thought it was just a story like Grimm's fairy tales. But think about it. Rip Van Winkle, he encounters small, unusual little men. He's told to drink some sort of a liquid. He falls into a deep sleep for 20 years, and she goes, that is your classic missing time and alien abduction.
It could be.
It could be. I never looked at it that way. All right, last book I want to hit on quickly, is Underground Bases. I read this book on underground bases, and they say in Raven Rock, which is in Pennsylvania, there's an underground Pentagon that's actually there, 650 feet below ground. It holds up to 350 people, tunnel systems that run all the way to Camp David, and Raven Rock is in Pennsylvania.
Where's it at?
It says southern Pennsylvania, small town by the Blue Ridge Summit.
So you're talking down by Dunbar.
It could be. Remember the episode of Hangar 1 where the ground opened up and they were able to go in? There it is. It's real. I mean, I thought they just, like somebody said that and you kind of, they actually have it here. It's run by Lockheed Martin. It's in Hellendale, California. It's a landing strip under the ground for unconventional aircraft. So that was real. I didn't know where that information came from, but that was real. They say there's a high-speed transportation system that's underground, that they can go to different places. You got to wonder how many of the earthquakes people feel between fracking and building these tunnel systems is caused by that.
Well, they say they actually have a 4-lane highway from the East Coast to the West Coast.
That's what they say.
And drive-in theaters and, the whole 9 yards down there. They can live down there for 50, 60 years.
They say there's documents from Los Alamos from the 1980s talking about a nuclear subsaline tunneling machines that melt through the mountains and through the ground, and they use it and actually being used on the moon, is what it says.
That could be your humming sound that a lot of these people
do. Yeah.
I mean, they don't know where it's coming from. It could be coming from underground, but it's actually sounding like it's coming from up in the sky.
Yeah, well, definitely they're doing the tunneling as the humming, without a doubt. Then it talks about here about the program that the EPA has a program where they conduct milk sampling looking for radioactive isotopes. And this was done right around the time in the 70s of the animal mutilation. So were they taking the cows to take a look at the amount of radioactivity? It's interesting that this is an actual EPA program started in the 70s, the same time that all of the cattle mutilation started. And it talks about our aliens working with the government with the cattle mutilations and underground bases.
It's cattle mutilations. Again, we're looking at something totally, I don't know. I can't, in a way I could go with the aliens, and in another way I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, NICAP, they had the UFO Investigator, their magazine or whatever it was. They had a big article about Snippy in there, first horse.
Oh, yeah.
It really wasn't an abduction of the horse. He died natural, but they made it that way.
Linda Moulton Howe would disagree with that. All right, last point on this, because we're almost out of time. They were saying that there's actually people who live out near the Nevada test site since 1957. It's about 100 families that actually go monthly or whatever to University of Las Vegas to get tested for radiation. Right. So it talks about the human abductions, animal mutilations, all of that in the program going on. So it's an interesting book on underground bases. I found it interesting. So Fred, we're almost out of time. We had a very successful Pittsburgh conference.
Yes, we did.
And we got to find a new location for that, but it was very good. So that's our show, Fred. Thanks for being on, episode 45 in the books.
All right, man.